Right, you're all set.
Okay, good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 9 a.m. on January 4. Stephanie, would you please take attendance?
Of course, good morning, everyone. Ava Brunez Zimmerman has not joined us yet. Ellen McKitterick,
Present.
Alice Pritchard,
Present.
Mike Soltis,
Present.
and Holly Williams.
Present.
All right, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. I would like to thank the members of the public for joining us this morning. First item on our agenda is to review and approve the minutes from the December 5th, 2023 meeting. I'd like to ask the committee for a review of those minutes and a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions?
Holly Williams. I wasn't here at the last meeting.
Okay, thank you, Holly. All right, the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item, the discussion of the CEO performance review process. Let me give you an update on where we are and some thoughts on where the direction we may move. So we just distributed the documents last month for your review. These were performance evaluation documents that our chair had used. We received some feedback, which was very helpful. Thank you. And after considering the feedback, where we are on this project, where we are in the calendar year, and our ultimate goal, which is to create an effective, repeatable process, I have an approach to present for your consideration. First, it's not feasible to pull together a process before the board meeting next week. We have some further work to do on this. We need to, for example, we need to create a process for board and staff input. We need to evaluate the criteria. There were many criteria on the performance evaluation form. Do we need all of those for the CEO? So we have some work to do. And here's a proposal for your consideration. Propose that our committee work on this for the first half of 2024. It's going to take a number of meetings to get us through that, to be ready to present this to the board in early fall for use for the 2024 year. So what do we do if we pursue that? What do we do this year? Well, we've only done a CEO review once, and that was in 2021 of Andrea. And the thought is to do this year what we did back in 2021, which was at a board meeting, go into executive session, discuss performance, and discuss the CEO's performance. And our chair can communicate to the CEO those comments. Once we get those comments on the CEO performance, that our next meeting, we would discuss and make a recommendation. Well, we would discuss in executive session the performance comments and a recommendation for compensation adjustment, if any. That would go back to the board. If all goes well, if all goes as planned, the board would be voting on our recommendation at their March meeting. This would be kind of there's kind of a short-term aspect to this and a long-term. The long-term is to have that effective, repeatable process. The short term is we want to do some review, an appropriate review for 2023. So, Aaron, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, my thought is that this committee could do the things that are sort of still need to be discussed, as you mentioned, in the next few months, so we could probably get rid of that long-term repeatable process in front of the board by mid-year. I don't think it would take till fall. I think we could get it done probably by end of spring.
Okay. Anyone have any other thoughts, comments, insights?
Could I ask a couple questions? I'm curious because I wasn't here for
Okay, so it
the.
looks like we have a plan.
Oh,
Sorry,
can you hear me, Mike? Sorry.
Yeah, can you hear Alice, Mike?
Oh, can I, Mike?
I can hear you.
Okay, but Mike cannot hear me?
I'm not sure.
Well, I could hear you, but you're in an echo chamber.
Oh, okay. So just a quick question, I guess. I wasn't here obviously for the last 2021 review. I'm just curious whether the questions or, metrics or whatever self-evaluation was used then has any relationship to the questions that we're thinking of for the future. It seems like there might be an opportunity to pilot some questions, see if they work for us for the long-term strategy. So I think there could be some blending of the two perhaps, but maybe Aaron, you know more about the actual questions.
So the 2021 was definitely informal. It was done solely in executive session. I was not part of it. So Mike and I have talked. He doesn't remember either. So I don't know, Holly, you were here then, if you remember it at all. My recollection was that it was relatively short. So I don't know really what was discussed.
It was relatively short. And I think the reason why was because I think there was general consensus that there had been kind of ongoing evaluation and everything throughout the year, which I personally think is, best practice from an HR standpoint. And so, yes, there wasn't, substantive discussion. It was more, now what? Like, what do we have to do next? If that's helpful.
Right. So just by way of context, Andrea had come on board in March of 2020. That evaluation was done about 18 months after she came in. And those have been 18 very, very full months. So, in terms of, was the board okay with the direction of the agency and the decisions being made? Like those, every single month there was some sort of substantive decision being presented to the board. So I think that's kind of why there was that feeling that there was very clear ongoing communication between the board and the CEO. But I think Mike is right that now we're into steady state. We're not in this sort of all hands on deck making the thing move. It is a good idea to have a repeatable process. So, I think and of course, what happens in executive session stays in executive session, so none of us really know. But I think if the board as a whole wants to have an opportunity to take the moment to discuss the performance, then Fran can kind of give that to me separately in feedback. Which she and I meet regularly anyway. And then as we move forward, we can kind of develop the process that I think is what a grown-up agency has with, standards and self-evaluation.
Any other comments, questions? Just one comment. Holly, you mentioned with Andrea, it was always, what's coming next, what's coming next. I anticipate that this repeatable process we come up with, part of it would be the CEO setting goals, objectives. Here's what we're going to do this year. And so that we don't lose 2024, so that we're not sitting in July saying, okay, what are the objectives and goals? Aaron is going to prepare goals and objectives for the year early on so that we will not miss next year, is my point.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we have a consensus on that. That's what we will report to the board next week. Moving to our next agenda item, Michael, would you please discuss our policy priorities for 2024 in addition to our CEO performance evaluation?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. And Happy New Year to everybody. Totally, this time of year is the time to look ahead of what do we want to accomplish for the year. And he felt that's an appropriate subject to talk about in this meeting on the policy front. One of the things that we want to also do, not related to any specific policy, is sort of formalize our policy review process. So there are some policies we sort of have to review, other policies maybe we're not required to, but there's no reason why we should let them sit and get stale. So we're going to sort of implement a process where we review all of our policies, at least in the legal team, and then sort of maybe ask the experts, if it's a financial policy, ask the finance team to review it as well, make sure it still reflects the current reality. So that's something we want to make sure we begin today. We don't know yet what the cadence will be, maybe on an annual basis, maybe biannual. Something reasonable that sort of can be accomplished given all the other priorities that we have. As far as specific policies, I'm going to share my screen for a second. Everyone see a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So these are our priorities for the year, what we've identified now. Obviously, there's potential that they change as needs arise, but this is sort of what we're forecasting for the year. The first one isn't the most important one. It just happens to be one that we were working on at the tail end of 2023, and it spilled over into this year. So the business travel and related expense policy, you'll likely see that soon. When that policy was originally written, it was sort of height of the pandemic, brand new agency. We didn't know what we were going to be and what our sort of work status was going to be. Now we sort of know, employees spend 95 to 100% of their time working from home. What does that mean when it comes to travel? So we want to make sure we refresh the policy to reflect that reality. Also, a little bit of a preview, the finance team is potentially going to use a new system to document, and approve expenses. So we want to make sure that the policy reflects the actual reality of that submission of the expenses, documentation needed, and the actual approval process. So we'll be potentially making updates for that. Actually, we're going to make updates for that. The second category is sole proprietor and self-employed policies. At the moment, our policies around sole proprietors and self-employed, I'll describe as sort of strict on the claim side and a little bit loose on the contribution side. And what I mean by that, for eligibility and benefit calculations on the claim side, we require them to submit prior calendar year tax filings at the moment. They have a sort of indicia of reliability. There's a legal responsibility to file those taxes and for them to be correct. So we sort of have a little more trust in them. But what that means is if your base period is in the current calendar year, if one of the quarters of your base period is in the current calendar year, or you haven't filed your taxes for the prior year. So if you file a claim now, maybe you haven't filed your taxes for 2023, sort of we aren't able to accept those and use those, and we sort of have to fake what those quarters would be based on prior years prior to 2023. We're thinking about if there's ways to be a little bit more flexible on that. It still has reliability, and still we can confirm that there are, truly their wages that were earned, but maybe allow us to consider more recent quarters. And then on the contribution side, when I said we were a little bit more loose, is right now we allow sole proprietors and self-employed individuals to contribute and report $0 in wages for the first 3 quarters of a calendar year, and then sort of true it up in the 4th calendar year, which is very generous to them. And maybe if we do loosen up the claim side, maybe we have to be a little bit stricter on the contribution side. So I don't think we'll ever get to the point where we take sort of contributions as the sole source of their wages for a given quarter, because it just sort of naturally incentivizes someone to report over contribute in a quarter when they know they have a claim coming up, and maybe under contribute when they don't think they do. But maybe there's some sort of middle ground we can find between, you know, how loose we are with the contributions and how strict we are with the benefits. So we're going to explore and think of options around those individuals. The next big category is the municipality, Board of Education, state employees opt-in policies. We have general rules about how the opt-in works and sort of the parameters of the opt-in, the effective dates and things of that nature. But what we don't really have is the specific process. So what we need to build is making sure that when an employer, you know, one of these employers decides to participate through a collective bargaining process, that they register the right way. And what do I mean by that? At the moment, we do have municipalities and boards of education who are registered with us, but to our understanding, 100% of those, it was a mistake. They didn't do it as part of a collective bargaining process. They just thought they had to participate, or their TPA thought they had to participate. So what we want to make sure happens is when one of these entities truly wants to participate as part of the collective bargaining process, that they, you know, that they submit their registration, and it's clear that that's what their intent is, and that not that they made a mistake and that they thought they had to participate. So we need to make sure, you know, working with IT, what's the best process to make sure that our accounts show the difference between those two potential registered employers. The other part of that is on the claim side. So it becomes a little more complicated with these groups, particularly the municipalities, because you may have, you know, employees in that municipality who report to or who are members of different collective bargaining agreements, as well as employees who are not part of a collective bargaining agreement at all. And the way the rules work according to our statute is when the first bargaining unit agrees to participate and collectively bargains to participate and they register, that pulls all of their members in, as well as all the non-members in from that entity. What it doesn't do is pull in all of the members of a different collective bargaining unit. So we may have situations where a town may decide to participate and maybe their clerical union are all participating and all the non-union members are participating, but their, you know, police union and IT union are not participating. And at claim time, we need to make sure we know which group that employee is a part of. It's not an issue at the moment because it's sort of all employers are either all in or all out. And the one employer that we currently have this arrangement with is a state, and we have sort of inside information about state employees, so we can sort of verify that. But for these local governments, we don't have it right now. So we want to explore what's the best process to make sure that we are paying claims for the participating employees and not for the non-participating ones, and also not have, you know, significant delays in the process in order to verify that. So definitely something we have to think about, and it's starting to become real because we've started to receive inquiries about, you know, maybe some collective bargaining units want to start to participate. So definitely expect to see some policy recommendations on that front. And then the sort of last specific category is private plans. We have a few ideas on private plans, always learning lessons from prior years. Some ideas we had, the first one seems kind of harsh, penalties for minor infractions. This is actually the opposite. We're trying to be less harsh. At the moment, we sort of have one penalty for private plans that don't comply with the requirements. We terminate their private plan and penalize them as part of that termination. That feels overly harsh for some of the infractions we're seeing. Things like not submitting their annual report or not submitting it on time, maybe not updating their surety bond on an annual basis on time. One of the things we've learned through the fund recovery process is, you know, on the fund recovery side, notices to employers, hey, you haven't paid us yet, you haven't reported zeros, do you really plan to register? Some of those fell on deaf ears, but then when we submitted a notice, okay, you're registered with us, you haven't paid us, here's a $50 penalty, all of a sudden we were receiving responses from thousands of employers, oh, I don't actually have covered employees in Connecticut, or I'm not a covered employer, I registered accidentally. That sort of financial penalty, while there is value in collecting $50, the better value was in getting the registration and getting them to comply correctly. And sort of using that model, maybe it will work on the private plan side. We don't really, you know, I don't know what the penalty will be, but it's not the $50 we want. It's the annual report that we want them to submit on time, or it's the, you know, surety bond or other rules we want to make sure they're following. So we want to consider that as an option for the private plan side. The other thing we want to consider is flexibility to reduce the contribution rate. At the moment, when they file their application for the 3-year private plan, they tell us what the contribution rate is, and they're sort of locked into that rate for the 3 years. If they want to make a change, that's considered a material change to their plan. They need to submit a new application, a new vote. It becomes a new private plan. We want to consider whether that's the right way to go. So, for example, an employer may take the same rate as the state program, the 0.5%, but maybe their insurance carrier is only charging them 0.3%. And there's no other expenses related to that private plan. That employer has this extra 0.2% of their employees' wages they've deducted that they now have to account for, track, and make sure they don't use. And at the end of the day, they either have to return it to the employees or give it to us if the private plan terminates and they still have the funds. What may be easier for them is just to only take the 0.3% up front. But technically that is a material change because they told the employees they're going to take the 0.5%. So we want to consider whether we want to have flexibility on that and maybe think about, you know, maybe they start with 0.5, they can reduce to 0.3, but then what happens if they want to go back up to 0.4? Do they have to vote for that increase sort of after the fact? Something we want to consider to maybe add flexibility and sort of stop being overly harsh to the current plan design. And then finally, we have processed about half a dozen audits this year. So we have that audit guide, which we always knew was going to be work in progress. We might need to make some changes to maybe have some differences in the process going forward for audits. One of those sort of lessons learned things. And then finally, just any other policies that come up as needed. We'll be obviously working with our other internal teams and then feedback from external sources as to what other policies might be necessary, and they may, you know, move other things around as far as the priority that was listed above. So that is basically it. Happy to take any questions that the committee has.
Any questions, comments? All right, Michael, I have one. If a private plan says 0.5% deduction, and we down the road reduce the 0.5% to, you know, something less, can the private plan automatically go down to what our contribution rate is, or is that a material change?
Yes, it is a material change, but they actually are required to make that change. So we did write originally in the policies that any material changes that were required by law, which probably the contribution rate is the most likely one that would come into play. But anything else we do about the benefits, they have to make that change, and they don't have to do a new vote for it.
Okay.
You know, presuming that the change is only to sort of bring them into compliance. If they sort of made other changes in, you know, if we told them they had to go to 0.4% because that's what the public plan used, but they went to 0.3, we probably, at the current state, we would need them to you know, file a new application for that because they're sort of going above and beyond what the law is requiring them to do. But sort of the flexibility we want to build in potentially is to allow them to do that, even though it is a material change.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments for Michael? Thank you for your report, Michael. Next item on the agenda is an update on staffing. Aaron?
Thank you so much. I just want to share my org chart, which I know I have available. It's not letting me share it. I'll try one more time. So we, you know, have clearly slowed down in terms of our hiring and growth from our beginning years, but we continue to add to the staff as needed. Let's try and get to just so you can see it a little better. So this is kind of what we look like right now with, you know, our IT and fiscal teams really being the largest, with half a dozen people in benefits, with outreach being relatively small, and Maddie holding down the fort on community and government affairs. We have a couple of postings out the data engineer, which is highlighted in green. We have an offer out. We have received unofficial word that it's being accepted. So that is going to be a really great addition to our IT team. We also continuously try to bring in people with Salesforce experience. Actually had a Salesforce developer posting on continuous recruitment with DAS. It is no longer on continuous recruitment. We are kind of working through, at this moment, working through some of the applications. We may end up putting that back out, but that's out there because really all of our systems are on that Salesforce platform. It's really important to us to make sure we maintain a good roster of people who understand Salesforce. However, we have to compete with a lot of other state agencies and a lot of other entities because Salesforce is so popular. And then the newest posting, which was posted right before the holidays and will continue to stay open until January 17th, is to help supplement our outreach and engagement. It is the Community Partnership Liaison, highlighted in blue. You can find the posting on the CT Jobs website. It is designed to be a person who can supplement our outreach efforts. Now that the world has opened up more, there are more opportunities for us to have in-person meetings, in-person sessions, in-person trainings. A lot of these happen on nights and weekends, so we actually built the posting to reflect that that will be part of the expectation. So it's a flexible schedule with an emphasis on being available on nights and weekends if needed. But it really is to help us make sure that we're getting out in the public across the state and doing some in-person work. We have some preliminary plans for some other outreach efforts, which we'll be talking about in the coming months that may involve a couple other positions, but this is what we look like right now. So I just wanted to share that with you and see if anyone had any questions. Okay, if you know anybody who'd be interested, the Community Partnership Liaison really is someone who can engage with the public, build those relationships with community organizations, be a trainer, be a facilitator, maybe someone who's interested in a flexible schedule, who has nights and weekends generally available. Please send them to the DAS jobs page to check that out. Yes, Alice.
Erin, I just wanted to offer, as part of my work, I have been working with higher education institutions to talk about internships. And I hadn't really thought about the paid leave work, but if there's an opportunity perhaps for us to talk about that, there might be some opportunities here to grow our own by working with higher ed. So I'd be happy to have that conversation with whoever you would suggest.
That would be lovely. We've talked about it a little bit, but it would be great to have some more serious conversations and see if there's things that we could do. I personally think the stuff that we do is very interesting.
I think so too. I think so too.
That'd be great. Thank you. We'll follow up. Thank you for that.
Great.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions or comments for Erin? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Any old business anyone wants to raise? Any new business anyone wants to raise? Okay, moving to adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. It is 9:29. I wish everyone a happy and healthy new year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.